is Kevin Morris. I'm an athletic trainer and club sports director at Achieve Sports Medicine. And today we are going to talk about one of the most sought after injury prevention topics amongst youth athletes, ACL injuries. I believe there are two aspects of every injury prevention program. There is the learning aspect or the awareness side. So what is the who, what, when, where, why, how of injuries, and what are the most underlying risk factors for those types of injuries. And there's also the doing side or the intervention side. So now that we understand what those risk factors are, how do we correct them and how do we better prepare ourselves to limit that risk of injury? In today's video, we are going to talk about the four biggest neuromuscular risk factors of ACL injuries: single leg dominance, quadriceps dominance, ligament dominance, and trunk dominance. The ACL stands for Anterior Cruciate Ligament. Anterior meaning the front of your knee, cruciate meaning cross, or how the ACL and the PCL cross each other within the knee, and ligament meaning connecting from one landmark of a bone to another landmark of a bone. So for the ACL, it means connecting from the femur or your thigh bone down to your tibia or shin bone. The ACL is a static stabilizer. What I mean by static stabilizer is that it is a non-contractile tissue. So it doesn't contract, it's not like muscle. It just serves as a band to help increase joint stability. So for the ACL, it prevents from anterior translation or forward translation of your tibia moving forward relative to your femur, as well as it provides stability of your knee going into rotation. Numerous studies have looked at the causation and distribution of ACL injuries and have supported these findings. About 65 to 75% of ACL injuries are a result of a non-contact mechanism, such as cutting and planting, twisting, quick acceleration, deceleration, poor landing mechanics, risk factor mechanisms like that. Females tend to also have a 3 to 6 times greater likelihood of sustaining ACL injury over males. And this is due to a wide array of factors, such as biomechanical differences of the ACL being shorter in females than in males, greater Q angle in females, hormonal imbalances, greater quad to hamstring ratio in females compared to males, and a lot of other factors. The common sports for ACL injuries, or the most common sports that ACL injuries occur in, are football, soccer, and basketball. And that all makes sense based off of the most common mechanisms we see. Cutting, planting, jumping are all pretty common mechanisms we see in those sports. And lastly, the injury rate for ACL injuries is about 4 to 7 per 100,000 athletic exposures. And what I mean by this is if you have 1,000 athletes practice 100 times throughout the season, there will be about 4 to 7 injuries amongst those 1,000 athletes, or less than 1% of all injuries. The first neuromuscular risk factor for ACL injuries that we want to address is ligament dominance. What I mean by ligament dominance is the use of static stabilizers, such as your ligaments, to help absorb force over more dynamic stabilizers, such as your muscles. So if we go back to middle school and high school, and we're talking about Newton's 3 laws of motion, we know that Newton's 3rd law of motion says that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So what I mean by this is when you cut and you push your weight through the ground, and let's say I'm applying 1,000 newtons down into the ground. Newton's 3rd law tells us that there is 1,000 newtons that are coming up throughout our body. And we have these things called shoes that work as shock stabilizers that help absorb some of the force out of it. So let's just say in this example, it takes 200 newtons of force out of that force coming up. Well, then we are relying on our muscles to help dissipate the rest of that force or absorb the rest of that force. So that would be 800 newtons of force. Now, let's just change up the example and say that I'm still applying 1,000 newtons of force down into my cut. And my shoes take 200 newtons of force down, and then my muscles are only able to take 600 newtons. Well, now that leaves me with 200 newtons worth of a force of a deficit. That the next course of action is that my ligaments and bones have to absorb that force. And what happens with that is we develop stress fractures and we develop ligament sprains. So what we need to do is, for one, we can strengthen our muscles so that we are able to absorb that force better. And two, we can help control our foot coming down into a cut, or control our legs coming down when we come down from of a jump landing, and strengthen up our glutes. And we need to think of our glutes like parachutes. The stronger my glutes are, the bigger the parachute is, the more control I have with my foot coming down from initial landing. So what we need to do to address ligament dominance is to strengthen our glutes and to help work on jump landing mechanics and cutting mechanics, which we are going to show to you right now.
Stand on the edge of a step and place the other foot off the edge. Slowly lower your heel down to the ground, keeping your hips in neutral alignment. Don't drop your hip like you can see in this example. Place a band around the top of your knees and squat into an athletic position. Step diagonally, keeping a good tension through the band and making sure your knees don't collapse inward. You can do this exercise without a band, or can have a weighted ball in your hand. Lay on your side with your knees bent, keeping your ankles glued together. Open up your knee like a clam and return to the starting position. Don't let your top hip fall forward or back during this movement. Proper jump landing mechanics is an integral part of ACL injury prevention. Let's break down the movement. When jumping up in the air and initially coming down for a landing, keep your knees and hips extended. Land softly through your toes and transfer your weight from your toes to your heel. Make sure your knees are in line with your feet and not collapse inward or outward. And always keep your core engaged throughout the movement to avoid too much trunk lean to one side or the other. Just like with jump landing, proper cutting mechanics can reduce your risk of knee injuries. Let's break it down. Keep your plant knee bent and not overextended. Avoid letting your hip drop to one side and fall out of balance. Keep your knee in line with your toe and don't let it collapse in or out. And make sure your trunk doesn't fall over your plant foot and stays directly in line with the midline of your body.
Next, let's talk about quadriceps dominance, or the overuse of our quads to help stabilize the knee over our hamstrings, glutes, calves, adductors, and abductors. So our quads work as a stabilizer of our knee, and they're a front stabilizer. So if I bring the stool in, our quads connect down via the patella tendon down to our tibial tuberosity or our shin bone. And what they do is they help extend the knee going forward. But we also have our hamstrings in the back of our leg that come around and insert over to the top of the knee and kind of serve as an anchor to help keep our tibia from translating too much forward. So you got to think about it like a tug of war. So my quads are pulling up, my hamstrings are pulling back. And if my quads are winning the tug of war and are pulling too far forward, that means the tibia is translating too far forward, and our hamstrings are not strong enough to help stabilize that knee, which causes there to be an increased risk of ACL injuries, because we talked about how the ACL prevents from forward translation of the knee. So any great ACL injury prevention program needs to focus on hamstring strength. You can also focus on glutes, calves, abductors, and adductors, but hamstring strength is one of the biggest components of ACL injury prevention program. So to help correct quadriceps dominance, we need to strengthen our hamstrings. So we're going to focus on a few exercises that help strengthen our hamstrings.
Lay on your back with your knees bent. Make sure you are on a slick surface or have glider discs. Bridge up and slowly extend your legs out in front. Bring them back to the starting position and return to the ground. Take one leg and hold it up to your chest. Take your other heel and dig it into the ground to push you up into a single bridge. Hold onto a kettlebell or any weight in one hand and balance on your opposite foot. Keeping your chest up, slowly lower the weight down to the opposite foot, keeping your back from twisting or rounding forward. Squeeze your glutes as you come back to the starting position. Hold onto a kettlebell or weight and move your feet to slightly greater than shoulder width apart. Keep your chest up and squat down until your elbows touch your knees. Return back to the starting position.
The next neuromuscular risk factor for ACL injuries that we want to talk about is single leg dominance, or the greater difference of strength power of one leg compared to the other leg. So across all sports, there are single leg movements that we have to do. So football, soccer, rugby, all have to do cutting, jumping, where they're pushing off of one leg to the other leg. Sports like basketball, where you have to do a layup, you need to go off of one leg and go down onto another leg. Gymnasts and dancers have to be able to land on one leg during their routines, and figure skaters have to be able to take off on one leg for their sequence. So there are single leg movements in any sport, and contrary to what athletes want to admit, we all have our preferred foot that we want to be able to cut on, our preferred foot that we want to be able to step on. And when we develop those preferences, we develop strength and power in one leg and cause an imbalance where there's not enough strength and power in the other leg. So then when we do have to make that cut to one side, or we do have to make that jump on one side, it's not as strong, it's not strong enough, or not as strong with your other leg of supporting that kind of force that we want to be able to apply. So what do we need to do about it? We need to recognize our strength, our power, our flexibility, and just our over movement quality of single leg motions. So if we are able to recognize that we have imbalances, we can better correct them through single leg strengthening exercises.
Measuring someone's jump height is a great test to determine strength and power in both legs. Ideally, we want to see 95 to 100% symmetry between each leg. Anything less can be a major risk factor for ACL injuries. We can tell off the single leg squat what weaknesses, compensations, and asymmetries are presented. A good single leg squat should see your ankles balanced, knees in line with your toes, hips horizontally even, and trunk not bent to one side.
The last neuromuscular risk factor that we want to talk about is trunk dominance, or the inability to control your trunk during movement. So you have this invisible circle point in our body, just kind of below our navel, called our center of mass. And our center of mass is our balance point. And when we fall out of our center of mass, we become unbalanced, and that postural control can lead to an increased risk of ACL injuries. So let me just give you a few examples. So if you were to pick something up, so let's just stand sideways. If I'm picking something up, and I want to stay balanced, I end up having to push my butt back so I can keep my center of mass in the midline of my body, or in that center point, to pick something up. Now, what if I can't push my butt back, and my center of mass has to move away from my body? What it ends up doing is you fall down, you fall out of that balance point. So another example is for cutting, and this is usually the big example when we suffer ACL injuries from cutting. And when we talked about during our cutting mechanics, we want to be able to cut and not feel that my trunk is shifting too far forward like that, because then my knees can twist, my ankle's going to twist, I'm going to fall out of that spot. So we want to keep everything within our midline, within our control center point of our body. So to address trunk dominance, we need to address how to strengthen our core. So our abs, our back, hips, everything of that nature. So we need to strengthen our core, and we need to focus on how to balance ourselves from our upper body to our lower body.
Get into a plank position. You can go on your elbows or hands. Engage your core by bringing your belly button to your spine. Don't let your hips sag or round up like I show here. Go onto your knees with your arms directly under your shoulder. Kick one leg out while lifting up your opposite arm. Switch and do the same with the other leg and arm. Keep your core engaged and don't let your hips rotate out of neutral position. Place your hand behind your lower back. Think about tucking your tailbone under you and apply pressure through your hand. Hold for 5 seconds and relax. Do that 10 times. Balance on one foot with your arms stretched out to your side. Slowly tilt yourself towards your stance leg and bring yourself back to the starting position. Make sure you don't rotate or bend forward at the hips. Extend your arms out forward. Rotate to both directions and return to the starting position. You can use a bar to hold on to during this movement. Stand up straight. Bring one leg forward and let your back knee touch the ground. Come back up to neutral and do the same for your other leg. Use a bar to make sure you aren't tilting to one side or the other.
Thank you for taking the time for watching this video on 4 major neuromuscular risk factors for ACL injuries. We hope that you learned something, and we hope that you can take something home with you. You can feel free to rewind, fast forward, pause any sections that you still need a little bit of work on. And if you do have any questions, please check all of our Achieve at Home videos at achieveorthosports.com.